And we are live. Welcome back. This is episode number 41 of Calibrated with Scott. I'm Scott, of course. If you guys are new to the channel, or if you've been here and you like it and you just haven't done it yet, if you go like and subscribe on the video, wait until the end, see how the content is. If you agree with it, if you don't agree with it, if you think it's good analysis, if it's something you want to see, just go subscribe. It lets me know that you guys care. It lets me know that I should keep doing these videos. Growth has been good on the channel, so I'm definitely going to keep them up, but I really appreciate your support. And yeah, let's just get right into it. Today's topic that I wanted to cover is the biggest mistake that I think Ukraine has made over this last 9 months, basically since the Kharkov offensive and the Kherson withdrawal by the Russians. We've seen Ukraine hyper focused on Bakhmut, and during this whole time period, while the quote unquote Bakhmut meat grinder was going on, the Russians were strengthening their recently retreated to positions across the Dnieper in Kherson. So the entire flank is now secured by a water barrier and a defensive network instead of just being a bridgehead into the western part of Kherson that was exposed. That would have given the Ukrainians an opportunity to actually do damage to the Russian military. There was a lot of VDV in there at the time, so it was the right move to pull back. It made me look like a fool, but it happens. It bought the Russians time. It denied Ukraine an opportunity to deal a decisive victory to Russia, and it positioned the Russians over the next 9 months while they were waiting, or the next 6 months while they were waiting for their mobilized to join the fray, uh, build up defenses in Zaporozhye. And this is specifically what I want to talk about. I think that the Ukrainians, with their overinvestment in Bakhmut, their singular focus on that city, and Russia's willingness to play into that and use that to their advantage, allowed the Russians time to fully fortify the Zaporozhye area. I'll put up some pictures right here of trench lines, of tank traps, both in the form of dragon's teeth, these little white triangle prisms that they put on the ground that makes it difficult for vehicles to drive over. The Challenger, they were putting out some propaganda about how the Challenger is going to be able to bulldoze right through these things. And the ones that they were pushing were, first off, not chained together, which is like one of the primary reasons they work so well. And they're doing this on a training ground. So if you don't know how the defenses look, if you're looking at the picture right now, you have a tank trench that has to be crossed. So that's difficult for any vehicle, tracked or wheeled, to get over. It's a big physical barrier that provides you with space. So and it's what the term for it is called an anti-tank trench. And then the next line of defense you have is dragon's teeth. Sometimes they're called devil's teeth. They have a bunch of different names. They're just tank traps that you set up, and it makes it difficult for anything to drive over that. And there are hundreds of kilometers of these fortifications throughout Zaporozhye now. There are multiple layers of defense, 5 to be exact. I will try to find a photo to put up to explain them. But these are the 5 lines of defense that the Russians have to blunt the full Ukrainian offensive before the Ukrainians actually start to make progress that will be difficult for the Russians to undo. Remember, Zaporozhye is flat and open. There's not a lot of urban settlements. There's not a lot of cover in general. There's not forest belts. There's not tree lines as much throughout this area. It's a very difficult area to approach because you're completely exposed to UAV surveillance. You're completely exposed to Russian aviation. You're wildly exposed to artillery. The Russians have fire bags in this area pre-set up. You can tell by the way that they have created their fortifications that the easiest route for the Ukrainians will lead them right into a fire bag, which is an area where You want your enemy to go, they get stuck there, and then you can eliminate them through high concentrations of artillery or aviation munitions. So the Ukrainians, what could the Ukrainians have done to prevent this? My personal thought is earlier withdrawal from Bakhmut, conserve that manpower, try to slow down the Russian advance through Bakhmut as much as you can, and then apply more pressure across the entire front and invest resources into stopping the Russians from just openly digging these trenches. They have these very large machines for the anti-tank ditches that are basically like giant drills that you would see maybe in a mine that would dig down, and that's how a mine is made. Uh, Sometimes. And in this case, they sit about 6 feet under the ground and they just dig a trench out, and then the dirt is ejected to create a berm, which is another defensive position with the earth you moved. So th- they could have put more pressure on these systems that would have slowed it down considerably. Just applying any pressure to this region would have given the Russians more headache, at least close to the front for the first couple lines of defense. It's looking next to impossible for me right now. I'm having a hard time seeing where the Ukrainians are going to be able to, act appropriately to circumvent these fortifications. Going through them is going to be a nightmare. I'm telling you right now, if the Ukrainians try to muscle their way through, it is going to be the bloodiest thing you've ever seen. It's going to be horrific. They're going to maybe get through one or two lines of defense before the whole offensive gets bogged down. Russian aviation will be working. It's going to be very difficult. So, I've seen a lot of comments on my posts on Twitter and stuff talking about how, oh, the Ukrainians will just go around. They'll just, circumvent in some way. And I've asked everybody who said this, can you please show me? And nobody has, because there is no way to get around this. If you look at the map, uh, the reason why Kharkov offensive was so successful was because the Russians did not have the manpower. They do not have that issue anymore. The Russians have healthy reserves and still a very strong main fighting force that is going to be able to stop the Ukrainians wherever they decide to push in. There won't be a 10,000 man offensive in Kharkov that basically regains more territory for Ukraine than anything else. And then in Kherson, it was just a Russian withdrawal. So there was not really a win there for the Ukrainians outside of a PR victory. And now you're looking at which direction can the Ukrainians possibly go in? A water landing across the Dnieper is extremely risky, and it will have high casualties no matter what you do. It is going to be a nightmare to supply. It's just not realistic. It would be the worst move we've ever seen. I think that could possibly come in combination with a Zaporozhye push, but you're talking about a place that the Russians have been preparing for 9 months for the Ukrainians to come through. They're going to need to demine everything, multiple minefields, multiple lines of defense, multiple positions for artillery. I mean, it is going to be an absolute nightmare. Then you look at like Ugledar. I mean, you could go there, but that is the furthest extent of Ukrainian supply. It is a completely exposed area. Staging here is incredibly difficult. It just doesn't seem like this would be the place to go. Donetsk is too urban. So basically Donetsk all the way up to Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. This whole area is a massive urban conglomerate. You've seen how slow the Russians have to move through this to prevent casualties at a high rate. If the Ukrainians just try to throw themselves at this, it's just going to be horrific. It's going to be the slowest, most bogged down little offensive that will not yield any results that the Ukrainians need. See, the Ukrainians are on the clock. They're the ones who have now delayed their spring offensive to the summer. The Western partners are starting to get a little, cold feet about the whole SMO and how it's going for Ukraine. It's starting to get to the point of the risk outweighing the reward. Maybe not for the United States, but definitely for Europe. Europe is starting to teeter, especially economically. So Ukraine has been a massive drain on an already struggling EU. And they're getting cold feet, and it's understandable. Hungary is already talking about, they're denying aid packages, and they're trying to solve the conflict in the proper way, which is peacefully with a ceasefire and then negotiations. But the West can't have that. They are overinvested. So the Ukrainians can't go through the Donbass, and they're on the clock. So the only other option is perhaps Belgorod or Kursk, that area. But what I want everybody to ask themselves, what does that achieve? You push into Russia, you don't I mean, you're going away from your supply lines, shortening your enemy's supply lines in their home turf. You don't have allies around. The whole Belgorod thing is just a distraction. It could be a way to try to get Russia to pull resources up there, but the commitment has not been enough, in my personal opinion, to force any troop rotation from the Russians. There has been no actual territory being held within Belgorod for any significant amount of time. I mean, they go in for, a couple hours and then they get kicked out. So there is no goal there. The Zaporozhye offensive, you're talking about severing the land bridge, isolating Crimea, perhaps targeting the Kerch Bridge, splitting up a Russian army that's on the east bank of Kherson, and that would be a huge win. And then you would probably have the Ukrainian government would have unlimited funding. Anywhere else, I don't see how they can be successful. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It doesn't add up. So I still think that they're going to have to go here if the offensive ever happens. We've seen incredible Russian intel lately, as of late, since the SMO2 started, quote unquote SMO2. Just the what I would consider it is almost the start of a CTO, a counterterrorism operation, and it has a lot of those trademarks. Targeting leadership is the specific one. Speaking of which, this is just a meme, but Zaluzhny, Sersky, and now Bundanov are all missing. They haven't been seen for days, and they were all targets. So this is very interesting. They could just be hiding in a bunker, which is also a very real possibility. I'm not saying that they're dead. I'm not trying to speculate on that, but it is just starting to become more and more odd. You're looking at this whole thing and you're going, oh, this is just nothing but red flags. So, you know, the the options are so limited for Ukraine now, and their one good option has now been overly fortified and highly focused on by the Russians. The Russians are not going to let a Kherson or Kharkov happen again. They have mobilized, they have changed the ROE and the SMO. They're not going to let this happen. The Ukrainians have had incredible issues staging, and that just makes offensives. I mean, it's a difficult offensive if everything could go right in the back end, but now you're talking about deep strike on logistics, you're talking about leadership being taken out. Any command post now is a threat and a target. Zelensky is still not in country, so there's a lot going on here, and I think that things are going to start rapidly developing, and I would suggest to all of you to keep an eye on the conflict over the summer months. Now is the time when the action is going to start happening. The weather is very beneficial for both sides to make moves. Just expect it, and expect it to be dramatic. I think that's where I'm going to take it out today. I just wanted to come on here and talk about that. Oh, actually, before I go, one last thing. A big event that happened, it occurred the other night, right after I posted my last podcast about the SMO2 starting. In fact, it looks like another air defense installation in Kiev was hit. It was a large drone and missile attack, very well coordinated. The drones came in during the exact same time that the missiles were coming in, and we have a live cam footage of the strike, and I will actually put a link to that in the description to my Telegram if you guys want to see that. It's like 2 minutes, so I'm not going to put it in here at the end of the video, but if you want to go see that, go check it out, and then follow me there for news and updates on the conflict. So outside of that, I think I've pretty much covered everything that's happened in the last couple of days. If you guys wouldn't mind going and liking, subscribing, following me on Twitter and Telegram, it's the easiest way you can support me. if you guys share this, if you like it and you want to share it, that is also extremely helpful to me. It's difficult to get new eyes onto your content, and you guys are my biggest supporters. So if you feel in the mood for charity, a share would be extremely helpful. Thank you all so much. I'm just a guy here talking on my computer, but it matters to me that you guys have shown so much support and you care so much. So thank you. Have a good day. And until next time.